Okay, well, so my name is Paul Peterson. I am the CEO of the OCD and Anxiety Treatment Center. I have been practicing for 20 years. And I would say, and I do say to people that I've 20 years, but probably 12 correctly, working with OCD and anxiety. And I want to teach you guys tonight how to become the OCD or anxiety ninja. There are things that you need to know so that you can succeed for the rest of your life. We know that these types of disorders, they are chronic. They are something that needs to be managed. When I started first practicing years ago, the idea was, hey, let's help people overcome these. Let's help talk through their emotions and unlock the reason why this is happening to them. And what I learned through this process is that's not how it works. When I first got married in 2001, my wife had some symptoms, showing some symptoms of OCD, and I started reading all the books that I could to try to figure out how to help her. You know, I didn't know. I mean, she wasn't in the severe range, but she definitely had some enough that it wasn't affecting her everyday life. And so that's where I started to read Brain Lock by Jeffrey Schwartz, or I read Stop Obsessing by Reed Wilson and Ed Nafoa, which they were great books 20 plus years ago. Now, I wouldn't use those. The research is so great that it's really moved away from what they were saying, but it was a great start. And really, when there was nothing else available to people to read, great reads, but it's not what you do. And so I tried my techniques that I had learned, and they weren't helpful to my wife, and I would say, weren't super helpful to my clients, although my clients did enjoy visiting with me because, hey, I would read up on OCD. I understood it to, I thought, a large degree, and I would say things to my clients to help them, and I was championing their causes and making them feel like we were making progress. But it's interesting is year after year, as I'd see these clients, we'd have the same conversations week after week. I wasn't changing what was happening in their brain. I was reassuring them, which was really just validating what they were afraid of. And what you'll learn is that what they're afraid of is really not their problem. Their problem is their brain lies to their body and says that something is happening that's not actually happening. That's the problem. Well, and I'll tell you more about that shortly here, but to explain a little bit more where I came from, just to give me a little bit of clout, that I'm not just this guy who's talking to you, who's claiming these big things. I'm trying to show you that I have actually gone through quite a few hoops to learn what I've learned. And what I do changes lives. What our company does changes lives. Well, when my son was 18 months old, his symptoms of OCD started to trigger out. I mean, it was so sad. This little boy, he would collect all of his favorite little things and in a little container, and that container got bigger and bigger, and you could tell that he didn't want to not have his things. He was so concerned that he wouldn't have them, he wouldn't play with them. And that container got to the size of a duvet cover, or those containers with those cheap white zippers, and he would carry that. And if you can imagine one of those things on the back of an 18-month-old, it was just ridiculous. And he wouldn't use it. I remember he had some Lightning McQueen black underwear. And I'm like, buddy, let's teach you how to be a potty trained. And he was not interested. He wanted to have them. And then multiple times a day, he would go into his bedroom, go to his, he'd take everything out, put it on his dresser, go to his bed, go back to his bed or his dresser, point it, go back to his bed, and he would do that for a significant amount of time, and he would do it multiple times. And then you could see that he had what is called a feel right OCD. You want to make sure it felt right, like it's all directing right. And when it did, you could see the relief go over him. He'd gather all of his things, and off he'd go on to the next, to have to do it again and again. And that's where I was like, I need to specialize in this thing. And I amazingly ran into something on the BBC, and they mentioned the International OCD Foundation, which, if you haven't heard of them, I would tell you they are the hub of all that is OCD and anxiety. They're an amazing resource. iocdf.org. If you haven't been there, go to their site. And they happened to just have a conference a few weeks after that in Washington, D.C., and I went out there. And I slept in a youth hostel. I was super poor at that time, but man, I came back from this experience, and I learned something. I learned that what I was doing wasn't working, and all I was doing is reassuring people or giving them comfort, distracting them, and those things weren't going to actually change what was happening in their brain. And so I learned how to use this technique to change the brain. Now, going back to what I already said, I'll change the brain. Well, why do we need to change the brain? Well, I'm going to show you some slides in just a second. And what I want to show you is that what the problem is actually what's happening in the brain. There is a misfire that is occurring. This is not something that you could just try harder about, do more, be a better husband, be a better wife, be whatever it is. It's not going to change it. Let me show you this first slide. This is from BrainLock. He did some great PET scans, and you can see here's a normal control brain, and here's an obsessive compulsive brain. And this isn't even somebody being triggered. This is just a general state of being. That yellow hazing and red is the brain's on fire. Most clients who come in to our facility will say, yeah, I have a baseline of distress, meaning I will give them a scale 0 to 10. 10 is the highest distress they could feel. 0 is not feeling anything at all. They're a 4, they're a 5, a 7, an 8. I even have some that they would say they're a 10 out of 10 all the time. Those ones, they just feel like they're going to cry all the time. It hurts so much. Let me show you another one. So that's OCD. This is anxiety or panic disorder. As you can see, different parts are lit up like a Christmas tree. All that red is high energy. This one is social anxiety. You can see that, usually there's a little bit of red, but man, it just starts to, it gets really lit up. Here is body dysmorphia, another one that we work with, where in this one you can see, going too far, is you can see in this one is that actually there's less movement happening in one sense. And so here's the thing is that, how in the world can you feel like you could change something that's physically happening? If you had a cough and somebody said, hey, you need to knock it off. Okay, can I decide just to knock it off? I'm going to tell my lungs that that mucus that's going down in them needs to knock it off. It doesn't happen that way. I use an example often of diabetes. I have a friend, best friend, his name is Ryan, and he has had type 1 diabetes since he was 18 months old or so. I can't imagine going to somebody like him if he was feeling really dizzy. In fact, I saw that many times where his blood sugar was too low or too high. I can't imagine when he was not doing well, where I would say, Ryan, what's your problem, dude? Did you read your scriptures? Really? Or, hey, you need to knock it off. 2 pauses for negative. You know what? You just need to get over it. It is fascinating. From here below, the world can accept that something can be broken. From here above, they don't see it. They see that because you think with your brain, you should be able to change your brain. Well, you know what? If I have diabetes, just because I think with my brain, I'm not going to change what my pancreas is not doing. It is ridiculous. And that's one of the things we try to do here is try to educate people and helping them understand that you can't talk it better. You're not going to say something magical. We're not going to say something magical where it's just going to be okay. It's not work. I wish that was the case. Oh, as I see people suffering so much with this, I wish we could say something, the magical words, or get the magical wands, pin it overhead and make it different, but it's not. What we do know is there is this technique called exposures. For OCD, exposure and response prevention. With anxiety disorders, we'll do exposures. But ultimately, we need people to change the way their brain reacts to the scary things. We need their brain to learn a new reaction, that just because you feel something so intensely doesn't make it true. And so these exposures are the game changer that can be for your life. But they're hard, and they're needed to be used frequently. For one of the things, so we talk about being this ninja, and like, why would I use being a ninja? Well, I'll tell you, a ninja, they don't become proficient at what they do just because they want to be. They don't become proficient because they put some hard effort or hurt a lot because of a technique they learned. They become proficient because they use this process over and over and over and over again. And once those things that were so hard become not so hard, they do harder. And what's so cool about with a ninja is that you can see they do these mystifying acts, these techniques that are incredible. And for them, I guarantee you, if you were to ask a true ninja, they would say, you know what? It comes natural. It's just what I do. And that's what we need you to do, is to become this OCD or anxiety ninja, where you are going to use the techniques, the processes, to get better and better until what you do just becomes natural. It's what you do, and you won't even think about doing something else. Now, starting up first, you know, those first things you're going to do, they're not natural. They do sometimes feel mechanical. They aren't always convenient, but it is the most critical thing that you could be doing in your life to get control. And that's what we want, is control. That's what the ninja does. They control themselves. We want people, you know, what we know is you're not going to overcome OCD or anxiety. You're going to control it. You be in control instead of it being in control of you, is what I'll tell my clients. And so you do these exposures. Now, here's the thing, is that as you get doing them, they get easier, but harder, and they get easier but harder again. And your ability to do things that you never thought you would be able to do will happen. And it's so fun to see that, because most people think that the way they are going to be able to get better is they will finally be able to figure out, create certainty about their situation, and that will be enough for them to get better. But it's not. They have to do more anyway, I don't want to divert. So we want them to do these exposures and get in a mode where they will do them anytime they need them. So I call it the zing. People get zinged with different triggers. Just because you get zinged doesn't mean it has value. It just means you're feeling something way more than you should be feeling it. And I'll tell that to people, like, why in the world do you need the same feeling as if somebody's running at you with a machete? What is that about? I mean, how many things in this world really should have that much intensity about it? Because even if bad things happen, like, it always works out. And that's the logical piece, and that's not going to change what's been concerning you or worrying you, but it's not enough. And so here's the thing, is that as you do these exposures, one of the things that I feel like will hone in your skills as a ninja is to close the gap in your exposures. And what I mean by that is, how many times can you have that zing of anxiety hit you and do nothing about it, right? If your brain moves like this, moves very, very fast, it does not take very long for lots of thoughts to start really seeding into something really large and become something really important in your life. Ultimately, like my friend who's a diabetic, if he decides, well, I've got family in town, I'm not going to do my exposures. Oh, hey, I'm not feeling very well, I'm not going to take my medicine. I mean, not exposures. Oh, hey, I just don't have time today. Oh, this is just inconvenient. Well, for him, that's not going to work. He is a type 1 diabetic. That is his medication. He's got to take that insulin. And I will tell you, exposures are your medication. Who cares if somebody's or in town and is hijacking your time? If you are getting zinged, you need to do those exposures. And so when I tell you close the gap, what I used to do is I'd have my clients get an index card. And on the top of the index card, I have them put Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, make columns. So today is Thursday. So every single time Thursday that I let one go, I let that zing go by, do nothing about it. Well, guess what? I don't get to just have no consequence other than I'm actually going to get a little worse. I want the consequence to be is pull out that card and put a little check mark. Didn't do it. Maybe that might actually encourage you to do it. But even if it doesn't, check it. Let's see how often you are or are not doing that. And if you find that, wow, 50% of the time I do, 50% of the time I don't, well, can we close that gap? What if you set a goal for yourself and hone those ninja skills and get it to a point where are you at 40% of the day that you let the zing go by? Can you get to 30%? Can you get to a point where almost every single time you'll do it? And I say almost because guess what? Anxiety or OCD sometimes is just so convincing that you're going to get duped. And what's cool is get back on and do what you know is going to help, which is do these exposures. And so I challenge you to get an index card and see how it's going. You might surprise yourself. Maybe you're doing amazingly well, or maybe there's some room to grow there. And I'll tell you, it is fun. My wife has OCD, my son has OCD, my daughter has OCD. I have a daughter who has social anxiety, and I grew up in a family with 10 people. I am the only one who doesn't have anxiety like my other siblings and my parents. And it's interesting to see how much suffering there is, but how there doesn't have to be suffering. And so like for my kids who've actually done my program, or at least 2 of my kids have done my program, it's fun to see that we do exposures. Last night, we did an exposure. My daughter was, maybe she's not okay if I tell this, but it's fine. She broke down because I actually showed disappointment in her. That disappointment popped her up to a 9 out of 10. I mean, truly, my disappointment is not like I'm screaming and breathing out fire. My disappointment is like, oh, Caitlin, seriously, I showed disappointment. She's a 9. And I tell her, I say, Caitlin, where are you at? And she said, I'm a 9. I said, what are you going to do about it? She's like, oh, everything's not an exposure. I said, you're right, everything's not an exposure. And where are you at? She said, I'm a 9. And I said, so what are you going to do? And she sat there looking at me. I sat on this beanbag. It seems to be where we do a lot of her exposures. Sitting on in there, I'm doing this. I'm looking at her, disappointed, shaking my head, and she keeps looking at me. And she said a hook statement, said, you probably are disappointed in me. And she did it, and she did it. And in about 3 minutes, that 9 was down to a 2. That's what she does. She does when she gets down to a 2. And it's so fun to see that guess what? if you knew anything about my daughter before she started learning how to do exposures, that would have been the end of the night. It would have been game over. She wouldn't have recovered. It would have been too hard because she would have been amped up. And what's fun is that a few minutes of effort gave her the rest of the night. And so we did it. And if she didn't want to do it, I still have encouraged her to do it, because what else? What's the other option? Sit there and suffer because somebody's disappointed her? Maybe I am disappointed. Maybe I'm frustrated. Maybe she blew it. And I mean, as much as disappointed as I could ever be at somebody, I would never want them to be a 9. Ever. Even to my worst enemy, I wouldn't want them to feel that intense. And so work on lowering or closing that gap. So another one is practice your skills. You know, in our center, we will teach you different skills to help maximize your ability to do exposures, to moderate your emotions, and teach you good skills that you need to be able to use for the rest of your life. And if you don't have those skills yet, you know, give us a call. You know, we want to help you learn what those skills are, but don't think that those skills are to replace what exposures will do, because exposures to me is like the sun, and these skills are what rotate around the sun. They're not to replace the sun. And so another thing that I want you to think about is, actually, so the other thing is that I feel like will help you hone in your skills is, what if you define you? Society says, oh, you don't want to be known as somebody who has OCD, or you don't want to be known as somebody who has anxiety. Again, using my friend as the example, would you ever say, oh yeah, oh, don't tell anybody you have diabetes. They might think you're less of a person, or that it's your fault. How sad is that? Define yourself as who you are. If you have diabetes, you're still who you are. Diabetes does not define you, but it is something that is happening to you. And so, do you have OCD? Do you have some type of anxiety? And so what? It doesn't define who you are, but define you. I am an amazing person. I am a good person who has this thing. And so if you haven't gotten there, you need to, because that is part of the skills. Because if you are embarrassed or humiliated by what you're afraid of, you need more exposures, because what you're afraid of isn't the problem, and it's that intensity you feel is that problem. And we need you to get to that other side, and this will help you. And so another one would be, oh man, live life. Now, here's the thing, is that most people who are suffering, they are waiting to feel better before they can do better. But that's not the case. If I am a diabetic and I'm not feeling well, I'm not going to wait till I feel better to do something different. I need to do more. I need to do something, or I'm not going to feel better. Nothing's going to change. And so living life, you know, what do I need to do? And so I actually came up with 7 things that I feel will, as a ninja, help you master your skill. And the first one on that is to exercise. Now, it's one of the things that you have the power to do, and most people don't want to do it. With all that energy that is coursing through your body, what do you do about it? I went to this seminar probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago actually. This psychiatrist, world-renowned psychiatrist with anxiety, he said, are your clients exercising? Hi, he said, raise your hand. There was 1,000 people in the auditorium, and you know, there's hands here or there. He said, get them exercising. And then he said, that brain, or that exercise is like a plunger to their brain. It gets the chemicals moving a little bit better. What do you have the power to do outside of exposures or therapy. It is good. It gives energy to go somewhere. It also, man, most people who have this happening, it's been a long time since they feel like they're succeeding in life. Why not be able to do something that people just talk about doing, but also clear out the brain? Again, good stuff. Another one is eating. Why do I need to eat? Why is that important? And the reality is your brain is an engine and it needs to be fed. And are you eating breakfast when lunch is supposed to happen? Are you eating lunch when dinner is supposed to happen? Are you not eating enough? Fuel your brain. This same psychiatrist, he said the same thing. Eat. Make sure your clients are eating. Make sure they don't do those simple carbohydrates that are going to burn out of their body within 45 minutes to an hour. Get them eating more proteins, and so they have more energy, because the reality is people who have OCD or anxiety, I would say they wake up at 7 in the morning, by 8 o'clock, they have spent more emotional energy than most have for the week. And for some, maybe even for the month. There's a lot happening there. So another one is sleep. You know what? This is a hard one, because especially if you're younger or a teenager, like, hey, it's nice to be up and be around and be social. And what if it's one of the limitations? Part of what needs to happen to feel better, to be more in control of what's happening. I can't even tell you how many studies there are that prove that lack of sleep enhances symptoms. And in fact, actually, the same psychiatrist, one of the studies that he had done, he found that people who go to bed after 11 p.m. need 2 hours on the backside to recover for every hour they go past that 11 p.m. time period, and to get the same reparative sleep. And so something to think about. And again, it's hard because other people don't have to have it, and you're not everybody. If you have one of these things happening to you, then you've got to do something about it. And it's like my buddy, we would be eating at a restaurant, and all of a sudden he had to whip out his little, he called it his pager, his pump, and he had to calculate how many carbs was in the food so he knows how much insulin or Humalog that he needed to give himself. It wasn't convenient, but he did it. And other people didn't have to do it. But instead of it being a bad thing, it's just who he is what he does. It's what helps him become happy. He's happy because he's not wanting to faint all the time, because his blood sugar is too low. So another one is socializing. And I know that when you are feeling anxious, socializing is probably the last thing you want to do. But it's important. And even during this pandemic, there's some difficulties that can be with that. But you know what? Get out of your house, go places, be around people. And again, you can't wait until you feel like being around people so that you can then be around people. It's the other way around. Be around people. The more around people you are, the easier it's going to be around people. And so I encourage you to have a goal, do it every day, even with what's happening. I mean, I just talked to somebody today that said the only time they ever leave their house is just to come to our treatment center. I'm like, no, no, that can't be. We need you leaving your house. Socialize. So another one is relax. Now this relax, it's not by a video game. It's not relax watching a TV or taking a nap. This relax is when you stop for a moment from all the demands of life and just be. That's one of the things I think is enhancing anxiety in the world right now, is that we are going faster than anybody has ever had to go in the history of life. When do we just take a minute, put our phone down for a second, don't check that notification? We gotta unplug for a second. Do we need to go on a walk? That's the real relaxation. Sit outside and spend 5 minutes and don't talk. Listen. What do you hear? Do you hear the cars going by, the neighbors talking across the fence? What do you hear? Calm it down for a minute. So another one, which again is the last thing you probably want to do when you're not feeling well, is talents and hobbies. What are you good at? What were you used to be, or what did you used to be good at? Can you do something there? What do you like to do? When was the last time, if you like fishing, have you been fishing lately? Well, if I feel like somebody's running at me with a machete, fishing is the last thing I want to do. But you know what? You will never regret working on a talent and a hobby. You just won't. But what you will do is you will regret that you didn't. Somebody goes out and plays basketball. Oh, I can't believe I just spent the last hour playing basketball. You're not going to do that. What they will say is, oh, man, I should have said yes. I should have gone and played basketball. And so, so here are some of those techniques that I would. Oh, and sorry, there was one last one, which is goals. And I want you to be able to set some goals for yourself. Like closing the gap. What are you going to do? What goals? Again, anxiety, OCD gets you out of this. Well, actually, what I would say is that when people have been suffering for as long as they've been suffering, they stop living. They stop living to the degree they should have been living. They get used to avoiding. They're pulling away. They're not saying this. They don't do this. They don't go here. They don't go there, and they stop living. Well, sometimes what we have to do is start living. And practice that living, because we're not going to get better because we're not living. And so here's, so those are my seven little techniques that I will tell every client. This is what you have the power to do outside of medication, outside of therapy. You have power, and each one of them, they may not change everything in your life, but it will help to a degree. And so another thing that I wanted to mention is that we know that your success can substantially be increased by family support, by friend support, by people who know what's happening. And I just wondered for yourself, when was the last time you let somebody know what's happening to you? Even if they don't know all the details, but they know what's happening. I can't imagine my friend who has diabetes where he would be asked to take care of his diabetes all by himself. When he was living at home, his mom would say, "Hey, Brian, have you taken your insulin? Have you tested? Where are you at?" And who in your life can you include to do that with you? And if you are here supporting a loved one, one of the things that you can do is help them in their techniques, help them in their process. Like for me, when I asked my daughter, "Hey, where are you at?" I didn't just say, "Well, it's time to do an exposure," and then I beelined it up the stairs. No, I sat down and I sacrificed some time with them. And I'll tell you, that goes a long ways for somebody who is suffering, that somebody would be willing to take time out of their life and sit there. And may not, and maybe not even be able to contribute other than just being there for them. And so, I would love for you to be able to find that. Another one is, if you don't have somebody, we actually run these groups. If you go to our website at the OCD and Anxiety Treatment Center.com, you'll see that we have these awesome, amazing groups. And these groups, one is a goals group, where really it's just people who just need support, who maybe have not gone through our program or any treatment for OCD or anxiety, that they can do that. We also do have an alumni group for adults, and we also have an alumni group for kids. And those are really fun, because you get to see the other side, that, hey, here is this room of people who know what an 8 feels like. They know what a 12 out of 10 feels like, where the engine is burning. There is so much power to that. And people get it. And so they're not going to say, "Oh, well, have you tried this? Have you tried that?" No, they're going to say, "So where are you at with your exposures?" And so they're free groups. Come and be a part of it. Come to our group, or to our website. You can check out the times, and I think that will be helpful. And so the other thing that I really felt like it'd be important for you to know is well, so here's these techniques, the processes that you can use, but what if you have a goal to implement these in a way where I am going to push myself. I am going to not only just do the easy, but I'm going to really embrace the fear. Because I think it's, I actually heard somebody the other day say, oh, those exposures there, they don't really impede my life. And I had a big smile on my face. I'm like, wait, it does impede your life. You don't realize how it's impeding your life. It's impeding your life because the problem is not that thing that you're afraid of. The problem is that you're obeying the monster that's inside your brain. Yes, it may not be the thing that's hijacking your life, but when your brain moves to something else, because that's what happens. I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that. It bounces around, ebbs and flows depending on the week, the month, the year. And what happens when this little guy becomes a big guy? Why not obliterate the little guy when it's easier? And why not give in ever? And that's going back to that closing the gap. I really want to close the gap of what of how many that I let go. And so that's one of the things. The other is, with exposures, I would challenge you to teach other people. I feel like that's part of like being a ninja, is wanting to share other people your craft. If you know how to do exposures or exposure response prevention, you know something that most people do not know about. I feel like the people in my center, we know that the world is round. We know it's round. We know that no amount of writing in your journal is going to make you feel better. We know 2 pauses for negative isn't going to change it. We know that exposures or exposure response prevention is the game changer. It will change your brain. It will make it stronger. You know that the world is round. Everyone else in the world, or the majority of people in the world, they think it's flat, and they'll fight you on it. They'll debate you. They'll hear what you have to say, and they may not agree with it. But you know what? Be like Christopher Columbus, who didn't stop even though people didn't agree with it. Be a mouthpiece. Help other people know that there's this most beautiful thing that will save their life, or their life of somebody they know, or somebody that they know that knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. Open your mouth. I wish I wish people would talk about it more. I know that wherever I go, I talk about it, and it usually generates somebody telling me about this thing that nobody gets to know about. They know one of their family members puts their little smiley face on, acts like everything's fine, and it's not. And they start talking about it, and when they start hearing how I describe the world that is round, they're like, oh my goodness, nobody's ever talked to me this way. Nobody understands it the way you understand it. And it's interesting. It's not because I know something, or it's not because I'm special or unique. The information I have just comes from 40,000 plus meetings with people with OCD or anxiety. And people with OCD or anxiety, they're the same. They may worry about certain things, but what happens in their brain is very similar. A thought comes in their brain triggers. That's what happens. Oh my goodness, is that person judging me? Did I do that wrong thing? Did I make a mistake? Did I run that person over? Did I sexually abuse that person? I mean, thoughts come in. I feel like anxiety or OCD is like this parasite. It goes into the core of who you are and finds what you value the most and then exploits it. So when I talk to these people, they're like, how did you know? And I say, actually, is it important to you? Of course, that's why it's attacking you the way it is. And I'm so sorry. And it hurts. And you're suffering. And people with OCD and anxiety, they're considered the silent sufferers. You suffer, but you don't have to. and other people don't have to. And so please, see who you can talk to, who can you open their eyes to it. You come into this group, they start talking about anxiety, and if you don't say something, oh, what a missed opportunity. You had the chance to tell somebody something that they never knew. And so I strongly encourage you to do that. And so I could keep going. I love talking through how exposures are. I mean, I can even share what some of the exposures that my wife has done in the last week, or what my son has done, or my other daughter has done. I'll tell you, my son, and so I have a daughter who graduated through our program I'd say about a month and a half ago. She's 14, almost 14 years old, literally a slice of heaven on earth, the most sweet, kind person. The problem is that she doesn't want to do the wrong thing. She doesn't want to make mistakes, and to the point where she would ask how to do simple things, like if I'm making chocolate chip cookies and and I say, hey, can you put chocolate chips in the dough? And she'd be like, with what? Oh, with this measuring cup. Okay, so do you want me to put it in right now? But yeah, so like this, or like how? And she'd want me to do it, give her the answer to create that certainty, so she wouldn't make that mistake. What's interesting is she's, my daughter has going through the program. She was in it for I think 8 weeks, and a week after she graduated, my son, so funny, he's like, "You've ruined her." Like, what do you mean programmers ruined her? He said, like, wait, why? He's like, because she's so selfish now. And now my son, he's almost 16. He'll be 16 this week. And guess what? He no longer has somebody who literally would take the brownie out of her mouth and give it to him because he asked. Now she says, do I want it? Yeah, I think I want it. So I don't give it to him. Does that make her a terrible person? No, it makes her a regular person who wants a brownie. And it was so funny because right before he said that, we had gone to my in-laws' house, and my mother-in-law had these 3 really nice sausages, and the rest was like 30 hot dogs. And my daughter went and grabbed a sausage, and my son said, I want one of those. And she said, you snooze, you lose. It was amazing, because that's so the opposite of what she has been her whole entire life. And she gets to be her. She gets choices. She gets agency. It's so fun to see that. And that's what I want people to get from this, is as you hone these skills, you make exposures what you do in life. 2 years from now, 20 years from now, if you have a diagnosis of OCD or anxiety, you'll use exposures. You do. And the thing is, some people say, oh, I don't want to do exposures for the rest of my life. I don't want to either. But you know what, my best friend, who's that diabetic, he doesn't have to take insulin every single day for the rest of his life. I bet he spends 20, 30, 40 minutes every single day, some days worse, because his symptoms are out of control, even though he's doing everything right. But he just keeps on doing what he knows what he's supposed to do, and he gets back in order. That's what I want you to see this as, is that instead of losing this much of your life, lose this much, little moments of your life. That's what exposure and response prevention is going to do for you. You lose little moments instead of all of the moments. I could even say with my wife, as she will do an exposure, gal, back in the day, because she's such a good person, would hijack her life. She'd be worrying about it, concerned about it. It could take the next week out of her life. And now, guess what? It's a moment. It's a moment. It's a moment. And could it be 5 moments in a day? Could it be 10 moments a day? Whoa, to do 10 exposures in a day? I don't have time to do that. I'm like, oh my goodness. But think, if you don't, how many moments of your total day will you lose because you don't. And I'd say for most, they would say I lose my whole day. Or if I'm not distracting myself or super busy with something which is not sustainable to do all day long, then they're feeling it, they're worrying about it. And so I wanted to open up the floor to anybody who had questions. So if you go into the to the questions part and type in questions, feel free to. I've got a few people who've already asked some questions, even emailed me some questions before they came in. One of the first questions I got was, how does a person with OCD who's been successfully carrying out exposures handle a scenario in which one of their fears actually happens? For example, they said someone with OCD around driving has a crash or gets a ticket. So here's the thing, is life happens. Life is uncertain. I don't know. Bad things can happen, but don't be fooled to believe that because you did an exposure, that thing happened. And anxiety sometimes will trick you to believe that's how it works. But it's not how it works. Anxiety or OCD comes because it's malfunction in the brain. The brain's triggering incorrectly. It does not come because you thought about it. But here's the thing is, so I do these exposures and I get hit. Well, I'll give you an example for this one. I actually had a client, this person said I could share their story as long as it is helpful to them or helpful to other people. They did have what they call it hit and run OCD, and they were terrified that they might have hit somebody to the point where they would literally drive hours down to get to one place, which should have taken 5 to 10 minutes. And they were down in Utah and down by a university, and this person on a skateboard hustled through a crosswalk as it was their right of way, and they went and they bumped the person. You know what was interesting? They kick out of their car and they started yelling at the kid, like, what are you thinking about? What are you doing? Go, be careful. And it would surprise them because that's not at all what they thought was going to happen. In the scenario in their brain is, oh my gosh, the police are going to come. I'm going to get arrested. I'm not going to be able to live the life that I'm supposed to live. But none of that happened. I will tell you, the anticipation is always worse than the actual. The anticipation, man, and hey, guess what? If it does happen, and man, maybe it is terrible that it happened, and guess what? We deal with it, but we don't get to deal with it beforehand. We deal with it now. Okay, and does it work out? Well, I would say more times than not, it works out. If I get a ticket, okay, guess what? Maybe I'm not going to speed, or maybe it wasn't really my fault. The cop just wanted to give me a ticket. I don't know. But another question was, and let me just scroll through these. How long does it take a kid to graduate through the program? I would tell you that it depends on each person. I tell clients, about 6 to 10 weeks. We're looking for a reduction in symptoms, and we also want to look at how they're retaining what they're learning and their ability to do it without us, because we don't want them to become dependent on us. We want them to learn the skills, use the skills, become proficient in the skills, and go off on their life and use them. And so really we're looking at that. We ask our clients where are they at. We'll give them tests each week, kind of scores that reduction in symptoms, and we really go based on that reduction and that proficiency. Another question is, it says, please explain exposures. I could use a good example of an exposure. So I'll give you one. So let's say hit and run OCD. I'm terrified I'm running people over. You know what? I mean, exposures, when you've never done them before, sometimes we will kind of step it up a little bit at first and then move to inhibitory learning, which is more randomness. That way people will believe in the process. Sometimes we can't get them to do those exposures randomly. And so an exposure might be as simple as, I am terrified of running people over. I might just do a writing exposure. I write down a phrase. And as I write down that phrase,
I'm not going to stop no matter what happens. And not only am I not going to write or stop writing, no matter how my brain tries to make it better, to make sense of it, to create certainty, I'm not going to. I literally am going to sit with that feeling and let it and feel it and do nothing to neutralize it. Maybe the thought of the writing is, I probably did run somebody over, and it triggers me. If it doesn't trigger you, then it's not going to be helpful for exposure. You know, we need that fight or flight response to happen, and so we do that exposure. They write, and everything inside, like, oh, I don't want to do this. What if this is going to make it happen? Or I'm a terrible person. I probably did. I probably need to go down over this way and go check to make sure I didn't do it. But I'm not going to. I'm going to say, no, actually, maybe I did. I might even use a hook statement, something that hooks me in so my brain doesn't deviate from what I'm doing. And I expose. And what will happen is your brain is going to say, what are you doing? I just shot at you to a 7 and to an 8. You need to stop, which will make you want to do it less. But what if you don't? What if you don't neutralize it even more? Lean into that fear. Write it bigger letters. Write it faster. Maybe it did. That distress level, it doesn't have to, but more times than not will actually start to go down. Your need to neutralize will also go down. And that's what we're really looking at, is you stop flinching when the monster keeps throwing things at you. Stop reacting to the scary things. And we can increase that, or we can start using inhibitory learning where we start doing randomnesses with it, which then actually creates a better kind of a better learning for the brain. Now, we also do just exposures, like, so for example, with social anxiety, you know, maybe you know, we're not focusing on the response prevention as much, but more of the exposure, and then teaching some additional skills with that. There's so many questions I'm going to try to hop through. Let's see. Do you work with people with excoriation disorder or repetitive skin picking, and would you do exposures with the individual? So we definitely do. We do excoriation. We do trichotillomania. We definitely will work with those. We've got a whole protocol with that, and yes, you can use exposures for it. It can be helpful, and so there's a lot that goes into it. So, but I don't think I've got the time to talk all the way through how that is, but we do, and it's, again, there's a malfunction in the brain that's sending wrong impulses that makes that type of thing happen. And so again, it's not looking at, oh, where's the trauma in my life, and that's why I'm picking or pulling. You know, that's just not how it works. Let's see here. Let's see. Okay, so somebody said, how many days per week is a program? You know, for us, so when I first started this, I unofficially started about 2008. I would see people individually once a week, and what I noticed is that when you get to a certain level of severity, they just wouldn't do the exposures. You know, it's like exercise. You know, people talk about it, they want to do it, they think about it, they plan to do it, they set the goals to do it, and they don't do it. Right? And I think it's the same thing with exposures. I mean, they spend their whole day trying not to feel this feeling, and now they're going to purposely, for a few hours every day, try to do those exposures. And when they get, you know, as I said, when that severity is at a certain level, we'll say, you know, do a more intensive approach. Make this your life. Don't try to fit your life into this treatment. I mean, honestly, if you have a 5, 6, 7, 8, a baseline of distress, if you felt that physically, you do feel it physically, but if you felt it through a medical condition, you wouldn't tolerate it. If you said, oh, hey, I have cancer, my liver's rotting out of me, you know, you wouldn't say, yeah, I have to go do my cancer treatment every day. Oh, No, you do it in 2 seconds. For them, they're going to say you're going to come for the next 6 to 9 months. We're going to say you're going to come for the next 6 to 10 weeks. But what we do is we create accountability. And I do say to some clients, hey, if you have the system around you that's going to make sure you're doing exposures every day, 7 days a week, because here's the thing is that your brain is learning, we're reformatting it. It takes some time for it it's going to take some time doing exposures to actually change. And so if you do an exposure today, I was busy tomorrow, the next day I do it, 3 days later I do it again, your brain's not going to change. Your brain is going to do nothing. And so that's why we actually meet 5 days a week. We create that accountability. We create plan for you on a weekend so you'll keep doing it. We try to get that family engaging, supporting so that can happen. We have our clinical assistants are following up with homework. Our therapists are following up with the homework to make sure that those exposures are happening and it becomes something you do. Let's see. How do you do an exposure when fear is related to group activities? Crowds okay, but performing as a member of a team is a trigger. You know, I would say is do a social anxiety. You know, I've had clients who might start with being in a lobby and where there's other people who could cast judgment, and they might do this. Click their fingers. I'm telling you, it'll trigger you. If you're worried about performance in front of others, maybe the reception starts looking at you, other people start looking, and again, the anxiety will go up, and which makes you want to do it quieter or stop doing it. But what if you don't? Maybe even make it a little louder. But here's the cool thing, is there'll be a point when you won't neutralize, it'll just kind of get boring. Just do this. And maybe I do another one. I move up to the next step, or I start doing randoms, like I'm going to ask people questions. But again, look at what the functionality is in the brain by doing the exposure. You know, you are not reacting to the wrong message. You're teaching your brain that I don't need to be so concerned. So what the exposure is, really, we want to trigger that emotion so that that emotion can be handled the right way. Another question is, you mentioned eating. Is there any dietary protocol of people with OCD? You know, I have never had a doctor who told me exactly what people should do or not do, or I haven't read any research that says you have to do this, you have to do that. But I have read, you know, too much sugar. I mean, sugar is a simple carbohydrate. It burns through you, gives you lots of energy, but then drops you down. So thinking of your body as an engine, you know, eat healthy, you know, do things that, you know, be smart with your eating, and recognize that sometimes overeating is really just a way to neutralize the intensity of feeling. I mean, we see that often where, you know, think about it, as a baby, there's what they call oral fixation. The baby suckles and gets instant gratification. Just because we get older doesn't make that gratification go away. We get older and we put food in our mouth and we actually get relief. Tastes good, feels good, and what if we don't? What if we don't do it, and we actually deal with that anxiety that's happening? Actually, well, I'll tell you, people I've seen where they'll do that and actually start losing weight because, like, oh, I'm not compulsively eating because I'm an 8. I eat while I'm eating. It takes me down to like a 5, a 4, a 3. You know, of course, shortly after I've put that in my mouth, it's just like a baby. You know, the nipple comes out and then pacifier comes out and they feel it again. You know, they need that, they want that calm, that peace that comes from that oral fixation. Anyway, I know there's a lot more questions. I just didn't have the time. I really appreciate you taking your evening, listening to this webinar and supporting OCD Awareness Week. I feel like there is no other area in mental health than OCD and anxiety that is better. than this, because man, with such a small amount of time, such great things can change. But it takes effort. And with that effort, like I said, that's the ninja. You become the ninja, and you make it part of your life, and you become proficient in it. I really appreciate you coming tonight, and have a great rest of the week. And if you want, we've got displays that are out in our lobbies that each day we've been having an agenda that we're pushing out to create more awareness. Have a great rest of your night, and take care. And oh, if you had any other questions, feel free to email me. I think in the link that you got, you can email me there, or with paul.peterson@liveuncertain.com. You can get there as well. Thanks so much, and have a great night.